Once upon a time, in the kingdom of Ekioba, there lived a princess named Omoye. She was not your typical princess. She was born with a trait that set her apart from everyone else. She had a habit that made her subject of mockery and ridicule among palace staff, royals, and the entire community. Whenever she spoke, she would accidentally spit. It wasn't intentional, of course, but it happened nonetheless. However, in a society that prized elegance and grace, this seemingly minor flaw became a source of mockery and rejection for poor Princess Omoye. From a young age, Omoye was aware of her difference, her peculiar speech. Her parents, King Esosa and Queen Esoe, tried everything they could to help her overcome it. They brought in the finest tutors, speech therapists, but nothing seemed to work. As Omoye grew older, the problem persisted, much to her dismay. The people of Ekioba were not kind. They would whisper behind her back. Some would openly mock her when she spoke in public. Visiting royals would struggle to hide their discomfort. The palace staff would exchange knowing glances whenever Omoye addressed them, and the villagers would giggle and point as she passed by. It was a lonely, isolating existence for the princess, who longed to be accepted for who she was. Despite the mockery and rejection, Omoye remained kind-hearted and gentle. She spent her days immersed in books, finding solace in the stories of far-off lands and brave heroes. But within the pages of her beloved books, she couldn't escape the cruel reality of her own life. One day, news spread throughout the kingdom that Prince Obaze from a neighboring land called Ugeli was seeking a bride. The kingdom of Ugeli was the richest kingdom that ever existed in that geographical location. A grand party was to be held at the comfort of the royal palace in Ugeli, and all eligible maiden and royalty from far and wide were invited to attend. Princess Omoye got an invitation. Perhaps this was her chance to find acceptance and happiness. With her parents' encouragement, Omoye prepared for the party with great anticipation. The palace in Ugeli was adorned with flowers and shimmering decorations, and the air was filled with sound of music and laughter. As Omoye descended the grand staircase in her exquisite gown, all eyes turned to her. She was beautiful. But as soon as she began to speak with other guests, they made faces, showing their disgust, and moved away from her. Then the whispering, scornful laugh and giggling started. Omoye's heart sank, and she felt the sting of tears in her eyes. She excused herself from the crowd and fled. Back in the palace in Ekioba kingdom, Omoye made a promise to herself never to be vulnerable again. She immersed herself back in her books, this time learning about history, art, and philosophy. She found solace once again in the vast palace library. Books became her friends, offering companionship and refuge from the judgmental eyes of the world. As the years went by, Omoye became a remarkable beauty with intelligence. Her knowledge was unmatched, and her kindness was boundless. Yet, the people could not see past her flaw. They whispered behind her back, calling her Spitfire Princess, and made cruel jokes at her expense. Despite the hurtful words and the constant rejection, the princess was determined to prove her worth. One fateful day, Adolo, a neighboring kingdom, declared war on Ekioba. Adolo was ruled by King Edosa, a fierce king that never loses a battle. King Edosa has used that knowledge to terrorize neighboring kingdoms. Ekioba was thrown into chaos as soldiers prepared for battle, and fear gripped the hearts of the people. King Esosa, though a wise and just ruler, was getting older, and the kingdom needed a strong leader to guide them through crisis and battle. Princess Omoye stepped forward and told her father, the king, that she will lead Ekioba in the battle. Her father had no choice but to bless her. As she gave her speech, her voice was ringing clear and strong despite the saliva that accompanied her words. She spoke of courage, unity, and strength of the human spirit. Her speech moved the hearts of the people, and for the first time, they listened not to the speech, but to the message. Inspired by her words, the people of Ekioba rallied behind their princess. Farmers became soldiers, craftsmen forged weapons, and scholars devised strategies. Omoye, with her brilliant mind and unwavering determination, led her people into the battle. The war was long and arduous, but under Omoye's leadership, Ekioba emerged victorious. The neighboring kingdom was defeated. The people hailed Princess Omoye as a hero, their princess who had defied all odds and led them in victory. From that day forward, the people of Ekioba no longer saw Omoye's spitting as a flaw. Instead, they saw it as a symbol of her strength, her resilience, and her unwavering determination. She had shown them that true worth lies not in outward appearance, but in the courage of one's convictions and the kindness in one's heart. The news of Ekioba's victory over Adolo spread like wildfire. Kings, queens, princes, and princesses came from neighboring villages to pay homage to the princess who defeated and eliminated King Edosa the Fierce, who had been a terror to everyone. Prince Obaze was among the royalties who came to pay homage to the princess. He was surprised to know that the princess he had seen at his party but never got a chance to meet was the very same person who had brought glory and peace to the region. "We never had a chance to be officially introduced," he said. "I searched for you that day, but I was told you left abruptly. Sorry about the way people treated you at my party. It was not right." She found herself opening up to him about her struggles and fears. Prince Obaze took her hand in his and said, "I see beyond your flaws. I see a kind and gentle soul, a princess worthy of admiration and respect." Tears welled up in Omoye's eyes, but this time they were tears of gratitude. She had found someone who truly saw her for who she was. The prince and princess spent the rest of the evening talking and laughing beneath the stars that night. Their love blossomed, and they were married in a grand ceremony attended by the people of Ugeli and Ekioba, who now adored their princess. True love sees beyond imperfections. Princess Omoye, who was later crowned Queen of Ekioba, was no longer mocked. The people had learned an important lesson about acceptance and love. Once upon a time, there was a young girl named Norma. She was 17 years old. Norma was popularly known by men as Egovi Nwa. This was because she had a very beautiful skin and she was very attractive as well. All the men in Agbani village, both single and married, wanted her. On the other hand, all the women in Agbani village hated Norma because their husbands had eyes for her. Some of the young ladies in the village envied her and constantly asked their chi why they were not created to look like her. Norma was a very troubled young lady, and because she didn't know how to express her pain, she chose rebellion as her outlet and became notorious for sleeping around with very rich men who offered her lots of money. Most of the men she slept with were married, so she became a target for a lot of women who already had animosity toward her for sleeping with their husbands. Countless times, Norma had been waylaid by different women who beat her thoroughly. Initially, when she was being attacked and beaten, Norma would just cry and try to break free. But as it became frequent, she learned to defend herself. So, instead of crying and struggling while she was being beaten, she would fight back with everything she had. One time, she got home almost naked because the women who attacked her had torn her clothes. This made her father very sad and angry with her. But Norma didn't care. She had little or no respect for her father. "Why have you decided to disrespect me in the manner that you do?" her father had scolded. "The people of Agbani no longer have respect for me." Norma hissed at her father and walked away. "I am talking to you, Norma," her father said. She stopped, turned around, and said to her father, "The people of Agbani never had respect for you, Mazimbakwe." "Respect?" she said in anger. "Oh, now you want to be respected. Why, Papa? Is it because you joined the church and now carry Bible up and down? Oh, or is it because you changed your name from Mazimbakwe to Brother Paul?" Please, Papa, stop deceiving yourself. Every sensible human being in Agbani knows how irresponsible you have been. They know that it was all the beating Mama received from you that led to her death. You killed her. You killed her, she cried. And for that, I will never forgive you. She ran out of the house. Mazimbakwe sat down with tears in his eyes. Her daughter was right. If he had treated Ijuwa better, she would still be alive, and Norma would have turned out better. Norma wasn't always rebellious. She was still grieving the death of her mother, who passed on 7 years ago. Ijuwa had died as a result of internal bleeding, which was not discovered early enough. Ijuwa was a very beautiful woman, just like her daughter. She was a very pleasant, easygoing person and got along with almost everyone in the community. But unlike her 3 siblings, she was unlucky in marriage. Mazimbakwe, as he was popularly known in Agbani, was a very rich businessman, and like most of the men he hung out with, was very irresponsible. Every day at the end of business, Maazị Mbakwe would hang out with his friends at Mama Nonso's shop, eating pepper soup and drinking palm wine. He would come home almost every night drunk. Ijuwa had learned from experience that whenever her husband was drunk, it was best to avoid him at all cost, or she would end up receiving slaps, kicks, and punches. Sometimes, no matter how hard she tried to avoid him, she ended up unlucky. She had tried to protect her daughter, Norma, as best as she could, but sometimes Norma would end up beaten too. On 2 occasions, Ijuwa packed her things, took her daughter, and ran back to her father's house. But her parents had advised her that leaving her husband wasn't a wise decision. They said she should tolerate, respect, and be patient with her husband, that he would change with time. Unfortunately, Ijuwa had died due to the complications of eternal bleeding 3 days after her husband had thoroughly beaten her. Norma could still remember every single slap, punch, and kick her mother had received. She was 10 years old when her mother died, but her mother's pain and suffering were still so vivid to her imagination. She hated her late grandparents for making them go back to her father each time. One time, her aunties Ada, Ugo, and Mma had come to Agbani to rescue her mother, but her mother had refused to go with them, and worse still, her father had chased them out with a cutlass and then thoroughly beaten her mother for inviting them. Norma was aware that she wasn't living a decent life, and she was also aware that it could cost her dearly someday. But she couldn't bring herself to stop. Moreover, she enjoyed the pleasure of seeing her father in so much pain and regret. She wanted him to suffer just as much as her mother suffered. Even the church his father now attends had restricted him from holding any position. They said he could not be trusted with any responsibility since he was not able to discipline his daughter. 5 days later, Norma returned to her father's house after that outburst. It was a pattern with her. Whenever her father tried to confront her, she would run away and return days later. She knew her father was trying to reach out for forgiveness and reconciliation, but she wasn't going to give him that pleasure. When she entered the house, she found her father kneeling on the floor, crying and praying. She stood for a while, watching him. Then she went into her room. How did she get to this place? She thought to herself. She felt so lost. Sleeping with all those men gave her temporary comfort, but it did not heal or soothe the pain she felt in her heart. She has ruined her life, all because she wanted vengeance for the death of her mother. Her father lived his past in ignorance, but now he seems to be a changed person. Why is it so hard to forgive him? She thought. Norma screamed and busted out in tears. Years of grief, pain, and anger pouring out with every single teardrop. She hadn't cried in years. All that pain, bottled up inside, had eaten deep into her soul. She felt a warm embrace. In the ancient lands, somewhere in eastern Nigeria, there lived a girl named Adamma. At 15, She possessed a spirit as fierce as a lion, but fate had other plans for her. The land of Isindu was ruled by a tyrant king named Ike. His cruelty knew no bounds. He was a man of insatiable appetite, not just for power, but for everything he desired. He terrorized neighboring villages at will, and no one was able to question him or rise up to him. His guards, soldiers, and subjects lived in fear of his tyranny. He seized lands and farmlands, took wives and daughters for his own, and sons for slaves and soldiers, without a second thought. His reign was marked by despair, and anyone who dared to oppose him met a swift and brutal end. Adamma was an only child. Her father, a proud warrior, had been slain by King Ike's soldiers when he dared to question the king's action. Her mother, broken and defeated, had become one of the king's many wives. Adamma was able to hide away on the day her father was killed and her mother taken. But she wasn't able to stay hidden for long before the king's soldiers caught up with her, and she was thrust into the harem as the 99th wife. There was a whispered secret through generations. They spoke of a prophecy, a child who would bring about the king's downfall, a child who was destined to bring light to a kingdom shrouded in darkness. King Ike, paranoid and consumed by fear of the prophecy, sought to eliminate any chance of its fulfillment. He forced himself on Adamma, hoping to sow the seeds of his own heir and prevent the birth of the prophesied child. Months passed, and Adamma's belly swirled with life. And at 9 months, in the dead of the night, she brought forth a son amidst the king's 215 daughters. The king's rage knew no bound, as he ordered that the child be taken from his mother and brought to him. Adamma was heartbroken. The prophecy haunted her. She knew that her son Kamalu was the prophesied child, the key to their salvation. But how could she protect him from the wrath of a king who would stop at nothing to maintain his grip on power? Then, 2 nights after the baby was born, when the palace slept, with the help of 2 guards, Adamma stole into the king's chamber. She cradled Kamalu in her arms. With tears in her eyes, she fled the palace. She sought refuge in the ancient forest, where the spirits of their ancestors watched over them. For days and days, she remained in the forest with her son, feeding on wild fruits. On 2 occasions, she heard people walking and talking in the forest. They were King Ike's men, and they had been searching for her. When she was certain there was none of the king's men to catch her, she took her son and left the forest. She walked for so many hours, but finally she came to a small village. She met an old woman, Nne Akwaugo, who took them in without a question. She was very nice to Adamma. Nne Akwaugo, as she was popularly called by the villagers, was a widow who had no children. So she was very happy for the company Adamma and her son brought. Years passed as mother and son lived in hiding. Kamalu grew under Adamma's tutelage. She taught him justice, compassion, and the duty he owed to his people. So as years passed and the young man grew, he carried within him the hope of a people yearning for liberation. Meanwhile, back in Isindu, King Ike was restless. Adamma had also told her son of a rumored charm Ike wears around his neck. It was said that the charm granted him supernatural strength and the ability to command the elements and the power to silence men with a mere glance. She had remembered seeing some sort of a talisman around his neck, but she thought nothing of it. Rumor also had it that to overcome King Ike, you must first disarm him. Nne Akuugo had died 4 years after she and her son came to live with her. Adamma missed her and wished she was around to give her some words of wisdom and blessings. But she knew the time had come to confront the tyrant king who had held her people in chains for too long. They got to the village at night to prevent the news of their return from reaching the king. She went to an old friend of her father, Mazi Udo. Mazi Udo was happy to see them. He took them in. With his help, Adamma and Kamalu were able to secure the loyalty of some of the king's guard. A plan was put in place to take King Ike unaware. 6 days afterwards, the plan was set in motion. Kamalu stood in the company of guards who had secretly pledged their loyalty to him. King Ike's rule had been one of terror and darkness, so a lot of people were willing to help. Adamma used herself as a bait. Her heart raced as she slowly and quietly approached the bed. King Ike was asleep. She reached for the talisman on his neck, her fingers trembling. Ike stared and his eyes fluttered open. But before the king could react, Kamalu was there, swift and silent. He lunged at the king and tore the talisman from his neck. It clattered to the floor. Ike's eyes widened in shock. His strength wavered and he struggled to rise. Adamma seized the moment and shattered the talisman. But King Ike was not yet defeated. He lunged at Adamma, his fingers closing around her neck. Kamalu moved fast and hit him hard from behind. Ike screamed and fell to the ground. By morning, King Ike regained consciousness and found himself tied to a tree in the middle of a palace and the people chanting Kamalu's praise. Adamma, Kamalu and the rest of his subjects were there too. The people waited for justice, for Kamalu to end the life of the tyrant who had brought nothing but pain and misery to Isindo for decades. But Kamalu spared his life and banished him from the land, with a promise to kill him if he ever returns. With his hands bound behind, he was escorted out of the borders of the kingdom into the deepest parts of a forest, and the people followed behind, chanting his downfall. The kingdom erupted into jubilation, the people rejoicing at the dawn of a new era. Kamalu ascended the throne with his mother, Adamma, by his side, the woman who had defied destiny and birthed a legacy of hope. Under Kamalu's rule, the kingdom flourished once more. The farmlands and lands returned to their rightful owners, and families reunited. Once upon a time, in a village nestled near a network of caves in Obunike, there lived a woman called Anene. She was a single parent. Her husband, Dibia, had left her after the birth of their son, saying he was not ready to be a father. He had told Anene right from the beginning that he did not want children, and she thought that his decision would change with time. When they found out Anene was with child, their relationship crashed. They quarreled almost every day, and most days he would not return home. After the baby was born, he finally packed his belongings and left. Anene tried to beg him not to leave her, even promising that she was never getting pregnant again, but that did not stop him. After Dibia left, Anene cried for days. She wondered how she was going to raise a baby all by herself. Days turned into weeks, and her husband did not return. When her baby turned 5 months, she made up her mind not to bother herself anymore. Instead, concentrate on raising her child. Anene had always thought that her baby Ikechi was special. His eyes held a wisdom beyond his tender age, and his laughter seemed to ripple through the air like a secret melody. But nothing prepared her for the day she discovered Ikechi's extraordinary ability. It was a hot afternoon, the sun hanging low in the sky, casting long shadows across the room. Anene sat on her bed, breastfeeding her baby. A very colorful butterfly flew into the room through the open window. Then she noticed that as her baby caught sight of the butterfly, his tiny head began to turn. His gaze fixed on the butterfly as it circled the room until it completed a full circle. In fear, Anene dropped the baby on the bed as she exclaimed, "Chimo!" At the same time, she moved away from the baby. Ikechi stared at her and his head rotated again, this time with an eerie grace. Anene's mind raced. What was this? A curse? A blessing? Or something far more mysterious? She sought answers from the village elders who gathered under a tree. They murmured in hushed tones as their eyes darted from Anene to Ikechi. The eldest among them, Mama Ezinwa, leaned on her cane and spoke. "Mwam," she said, "your son possesses the gift of the Ogbanje." Anene's heart pounded. The Ogbanje, the mischievous spirits who toyed with mortal lives. They were known to inhabit the bodies of newborn, causing illness and death. But Ikechi was healthy, more than healthy. His eyes sparkled with curiosity, not malevolence. "What does it mean?" she asked. Mama Izinwa's eyes bore into hers. "He is a bridge between worlds." His head turns not in malice, but to see what others cannot. Anene's mind raced with thoughts. She thought of her runaway husband. Would he have accepted their son's strange gift? Would the neighbors whisper behind their backs? But then she looked at Obinna, his laughter bubbling forth like a spring after rains. His head spun. Anene and the elders saw it. The wonder, the magic. Perhaps he was not cursed, but blessed. Perhaps he was meant to change their lives, to challenge their understanding of the ordinary. And so she embraced her son's uniqueness. She sang him songs of ancient heroes and whispered tales of shape-shifting animals to him every night. As time passed on and the baby grew, whispers of Ikechi's extraordinary ability swirled through the dusty streets of the village. The villagers responded in awe, some in fear and others in curiosity. Some people muttered prayers, fearing he was touched by dark spirits. Others gazed upon him with wonder. Visitors from neighboring villages began to trickle into Ogbunike, eager to witness the boy, whose head turned like the hands of time. They brought gifts of kola nuts and palm wine offerings to appease any spirits that may be residing in him. But it was the children who accepted Ikechi without reservation. They did not see a boy possessed by evil spirits, but a friend with a fascinating talent. At 6 years old, the children would gather around him, giggling as they asked him to perform his unique dance. Ikechi, always ready and eager to please, would spin his head and the children would clap and cheer, their laughter ringing through the air. At 10 years old, Ikechi could do remarkable things. His neck could extend up to 15 centimeters, and he could peer into hidden nooks and crannies. He could see the future and he could predict the weather, sensing the changes in the wind with each turn. And most importantly, he could see the troubles weighing on people's mind. After Ikechi turned 15, something remarkable happened. One fateful day, the skies grew heavy with the threat of a storm. The air was thick with tension, and the animals retreated into their shadows. Ikechi sat outside his house, feeling uneasy. He felt a strange sensation. A shiver ran down his spine. His head began to rotate slowly, a silent alarm that something was amiss. As his gaze swept across the horizon, the ground beneath his feet rumbled. He saw it then, a vision of the caves where a group of children often played, collapsing. Ikechi ran to the village square, his voice ringing above the gathering wind. "The caves!" he cried out. "The caves will collapse!" Thankfully, it was not a market day, so most of the villagers were at home. Recognizing the urgency in Ikechi's warning, the villagers sprang into action. They were able to evacuate the caves just in time as moments later a deafening roar echoed through the valley. Rocks tumbled down, sealing the entrance into the caves. Then there was calm. As the dust settled and the villagers started to emerge from their place of safety and counting their blessings, a mother's cry pierced the air. Her son Chike was missing. Panic spread like wildfire. Torches were lit as the search began. Ikechi, his heart heavy with responsibility, knew he had to help. He led the search party. His head turned as they walked through the valley, past the willows and the brook, until he stopped at the edge of a forest. There, hidden beneath a canopy of leaves, was a small opening, a forgotten passage into the caves. He led the search party through the narrow tunnel, guided by the faint echoes of a child's whimper. They crawled through the darkness, the walls closing in around them, until they emerged into a cavern, lit by the soft glow of fireflies. There, huddled against the wall, was Chike. His eyes were wild with fear, but when he saw Ikechi, a spark of hope flickered in his gaze. Ikechi reached out his hands, steady, and lifted him into his arms. The villagers hailed Ikechi as a hero, their songs filling the night with joy and relief as they danced around the fires. Ikechi was no longer a curiosity to be whispered about, but a hero, a guardian angel with a gift that transcended the ordinary. In recognition of Ikechi's bravery and his extraordinary gift that saved many lives, the king bestowed upon him the title of Ochemba, guardian of a land. The king gifted Ikechi a piece of fertile land, ensuring that he and his mother would always prosper. He also commissioned a special staff to be crafted for Ikechi, adorned with symbols of wisdom and foresight, to be carried as a mark of honor to remind all of the boy who could see beyond the visible world. The villagers revered him. His mother watched with pride as her son grew into his role, a beacon of hope in a world that often seemed too rigid and too confined.